Hi, I'm Dr. Metcalfe, and I'd like to introduce you to Terrorism and Human Rights, which is one of the optional modules on the University of St Andrews Terrorism Studies certificate. I'm a barrister based in London, specialising in human rights and public international law. I've been involved in most of the major UK cases involving national security since 9/11. Cases which include such issues as deportation to torture, the use of evidence obtained by torture, control orders, stop and search, and the use of surveillance powers. I've also been involved in training judges and prosecutors in a number of countries which have been affected by terrorism, including Russia, Turkey, and Northern Ireland. In this module, we look at the role that human rights standards have to play in this debate, particularly as they apply to the development and implementation of counter-terrorism measures. We start by looking at the international human rights framework, the principles which were developed in the 18th century during the American and French revolutions, and how these principles have been carried forward to the modern time, to the establishment of the United Nations and the international human rights framework, ranging from such institutions as the UN Human Rights Committee to the International Criminal Court, as well as to the national laws and constitutions of more than 150 countries. Following on from this introduction, we will spend each week examining a particular human rights standard and examining the way in which a human rights standard has relevance to a particular issue relating to terrorism and counter-terrorism. In the first week, we will consider the right to life. This is a right which has application not just to the obligation of states to protect their citizens from terrorist violence, but also imposes obligations on states to draw up guidelines in relation to how the states use lethal force, and in particular give guidance as to when that lethal force may be necessary or disproportionate in relation to preventing a terrorist attack. The first of these rights is the right to life, which not only imposes a duty on states to prevent taking life, but also to prevent terrorist violence to their citizens. We look at how national and international courts have interpreted the right to life to provide guidance over when states may use lethal force to prevent terrorist attacks, but also challenges the use of extrajudicial killings by states in relation to the fight against terrorism. In the next week, we look at the international prohibition against torture, including the controversy over so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, the use of evidence obtained by torture, the legality of deporting suspects to countries known to use torture, and extraordinary rendition. In the next lesson, we examine the right to liberty, which guarantees that no one should be deprived of their liberty except with due process of law. We examine what this right means in the context of modern terrorist emergencies, when states may not have the luxury of applying established due process. We look in particular at the use of indefinite detention at Guantanamo Bay and the use of so-called control orders by the United Kingdom. In the next week, we examine the right to a fair trial, which guarantees that everyone is entitled to a trial in front of an independent and impartial court and knowing the evidence against them. We examine what this means in the context of terrorism cases, which frequently involve classified material, which governments may be unwilling to disclose in private or even to the suspect in a closed hearing. In the next lesson, we examine the right to privacy, and in particular, what the right to privacy means in the context of technological developments, which allow virtually any communication to be intercepted and monitored, from text messages and email to telephone conversations and even conversations in your own home. What does the right to privacy mean in the context of terrorism investigations in the modern age? The last part of this module will examine the various problems that can arise from the way in which democracies respond to terrorist emergencies, and will identify the ways in which human rights standards can help us develop counter-terrorism measures which are not unnecessary or disproportionate. I believe this module will help you to understand the importance of the international human rights framework to the counter-terrorism debate, whether you are concerned with operational matters or with policy making. It can sometimes seem very abstract to talk about the right to life or the right to liberty in the context of counter-terrorism debates. But, as I believe this module will demonstrate, these are real standards which can provide detailed guidance on a very wide range of practical issues, whether you are concerned with operational matters or with policy making, on a range of issues such as how long can a suspect be detained, what methods can be used to interrogate them, and what kind of surveillance may be permissible. I believe this module will enable you to understand the importance of international human rights standards to the counter-terrorism debate, whether you are concerned with operational matters or with policy making. This module is also particularly useful to understand the international human rights framework and give guidance as to what governments and states may do legitimately in the fight against terrorism and what they should avoid doing.